Okay guys, Tip Tuesday, we are talking about tires. We're only going to talk about the tires that I feel are relevant and ones that I've run. So some of them on the list that I'm going to show you, yes, you may have put your tire that's your favorite in this list somewhere. Totally fine. These are the tires that I've run relative to each other. By relative, I mean like tread wear and tire size are within reason. There are a couple that I've left out that I know measure in at like a 140 tread wear and so on. So I'm keeping 200 as the minimum with an exception of one brand, which I'll explain. Let's get right into it. We are going to determine what the best tire is. So pay attention. Okay, so starting with the first question, you should ask yourself, what are you doing? What are you doing? And what do you require? What are your expectations? Is it grip? Is it duration? Is it consistency? Is it smoke? Or is it an overall average rating of a tire? What are you looking for? So before we get to what the best tire is, let's look at the chart that I've created because I love spreadsheets and I have so much time at the airports to make things like this. Okay, so looking at the spreadsheet, we've got brand, we've got the tire size, tire tread wear, what that tire's ideal pressure is, grip, duration, consistency, smoke, and then its overall rating. So I chose 4 categories as the most relevant. And again, these categories could be broken down into subcategories, because there's temperature and there's other things that come into play, track conditions and whatever. Rain is another big one, wet surfaces, but we're not going to consider those because it's just a tip. Grip, duration, consistency, and smoke. Let's look at the brands that I've run that we've selected. And I'm going to tell you right up front, each one of these tires may fall into being the best tire in a different scenario. Where is an Accelera better than a Valino? I'll tell you. Just bear with me. Let's look at the first column. We're running at 285. I chose the 100 treadwear Accelera because not only I've run the 100 and 200, I didn't find a huge difference between the two, but a 100 Accelera is still, I feel, a higher treadwear than most of these other tires. I mean, you can just do a fingernail test to determine that. Basically push your nail into the tire. You're going to find that even the 100 treadwear is pretty hard. And then you're going to find that a 200 treadwear 08R is pretty soft. So what treadwear gauge these companies use, they're obviously different, or they're obviously calibrated using different variables than each other. Aside from that, treadwear is not really as relevant as you think it is. I don't really care what the treadwear is because it seems like a lot of the companies that come from overseas just kind of slap on whatever to make it suit a particular need. So there are some series where they have a 200 treadwear limit, but they'll exclude the use of certain tires because they know that they are an unfair tire to use. Moving on, the Accelera, I ran hundreds of them in a row, and I found that the lower the pressure, the more the sidewall would deform. The more the sidewall deformed, the more I was actually running on the sidewall, which has no tread on it, and I was losing traction. So the Accelera really only works between like a 14 and an 18 PSI range well, with the proper suspension to go with it. I gave it a 5.2 on grip. It's not the greatest, but this is where it shines. 9.5 duration. This baby will last 2 to 3 times longer than most of these other tires. Consistency, they're a consistent tire. They don't really have any changes between one set to another. And then smoke, the smoke output on the Accelera is one of the worst I've experienced, and you have to run way more wheel speed to get them to really work. They need a lot of heat into them. Overall rating 7.3. We'll talk about this. It's not really relevant, it's just these added, but a lot of these don't really matter if you add them together, so we'll cover that. Federal, not a ton of experience with these, but I did run a competition on them. Was not really a fan. Grip, slightly better. Duration, quite a bit worse. Consistency was not good at all. One set would delaminate, the other one wouldn't. Smoke was decent, 6.9. GT Radial SX2 RS, that's the Pro 1 tire. Ran a few of these. Good grip. Duration, they don't last very long, 7.5. They are consistent, 9. They make a lot of smoke, so these are our highest tires so far, 8.7. Let's look at the Kenda KR20 I've run. A few of these, I would say probably 12 to 14. I have not run a ton of them. 12 PSI, grip was better than an Accelera, similar to a Federal. Could be better, depending. It really depends. I never set the car up for them. I just had 12 of them to run. So this one, I would say I have less experience. I'm sure some people may comment on what I've put here. Duration was similar to an Accelera. They last quite a bit longer than these other ones. They were pretty consistent, and the smoke was slightly better, but still not great. It has a very similar feel to an Accelera, in my opinion. So it averages out at 7.4, and Accelera is at 7.3. I think that's pretty fair. The Valino 08R, I did not include the RS because the RS is a 140 treadwear, putting it obviously into a realm of incredible grip and horrible duration. So we're just going to stick to the 08R, which is a 200. I do favor these on the front as well. Grip 9.5, so we've almost got a 10 out of 10. Duration 8, it's actually one of the worst out of the lot. And then the RS is even worse for duration. Very consistent tire, very well made. And then smoke output, insane. The thickest smoke, it's crazy. 9.2, I could probably even bump that to a 5. I don't really know what tire would produce more smoke than that one. Giving it an overall rating of 9, the worst category being duration, meaning that it doesn't last as long as an Accelera or a Kenda. Zeknova Super Sport RS, I've run hundreds, not thousands, but multiple hundreds. 200 treadwear, we could only get these in Canada. I know a lot of you guys are running the 300 in the US. Grip is an 8, duration is an 8.5. They do last a decent amount longer than like a Valino or a GT, but not as long as a Kenda and an Accelera. Consistency, they're a consistent tire. I found I did not have any DLAM, any problems there. Smoke, they put out a ton of smoke, 8.6 overall rating for the Zeknova. And then the most recent tire that I ran was the FD tire, the Vitour or the Vitour, however you want to say it. VO1R, 285, 200 treadwear, down to 10 PSI. Grip was a 9, close to the Valino, but not quite. Better than a Zeknova, similar to a GT. Grip could also be divided into side and forward and all these other things. Duration was better than a Valino, similar to a Zeknova. I would say the Zeknova is slightly better, but I'm not going to go into like 0.2s. I know I did over here, but I felt like these were so close, so I put a 0.2 there. Anyways, 8.5, consistency, very consistent, 9. Smoke, lots of smoke, 9. 8.9. So if we were to do an overall rating, you could go Valino at 9, Vitour at 8.9, 8.6, 8.7. So the GT coming in at 3rd, Zeknova at 4th. Let's get into a scenario where we have a budget of $1,000. It's a 2-day event, and it's a 265 maximum tire. What should we use? What should we use? Should we use the Valino 08R? Let's say you have a budget of $1,000. You might get 8. You might get 6 or 8 tires max. How are you going to do anything with that? You're going to get 2 laps in, and then you're just going to have to park it and then try to compete. So right off the bat, you can already tell that the tires with the higher ratings may not be the best case scenario, because that tire, depending on the car, won't get, okay, so on my cars, it doesn't get more than 2 laps, but those are a crazy 2 laps. So take it for what it is, depending on the competition. I wouldn't go with the Valino just because of the price, really. In 2 days, how am I going to last for 2 days? I'm going for an Accelera or a Kenda on that one, just because the price is going to allow for me to get seat time, which is going to allow for me to be more competitive. And I've always said these charts that I'm creating aren't really related to what seat time does to everything, because you could throw in a sick driver and it's just going to trash all these values and data that I'm putting in, because they're just so much better than what the mechanical performance is capable of doing, because obviously if no one's driving it, the car just sits there. So I'm going to choose an Accelera or a Kenda there. That's going to give me the seat time. That's going to let me drive. I'm going to get multiple laps and still probably have enough for battles. And good chance that everyone else is in the same boat, especially if there was like some kind of a mandated budget. And this is obviously personal to you. Maybe some guy shows up with no budget. That's not the scenario we're presenting. That'll be the next scenario. Call Jack. I'm using a MacBook. I don't know how to use it. Jack, I need you to get the other sheet up. Okay, yeah, open up the sheet. Whoa. Yeah. Oh. Oh. All right, Jack saved the day. Okay, scenario 2. This is an unlimited budget, unlimited tire rule. No width, no nothing specified, and it's only a 1-day event. So we're going to go all out. We are going to go with the Valino or the Vitour. Both of these tires, the Valino being the more expensive of the two. We're going to go with one of these two tires because we can just change tires every 2 laps, and we're going to have the best tires possible every time we're on the track. And in competition, you only need to do 2 runs. So we don't need to consider what an Accelera's benefits are, where it could do 5, 6 runs. We just need to put ourselves in the position that puts us on a path to success. So if we go over to my other chart, you can see on this chart that we have maximized the tire. And I'm actually going to put in the exact value. So 60%. Okay, well, let's maximize the 60% section. So we gave ourselves on the Valino a 9 out of 10, which is 90%. We'll do 0.9 times 60 equals 54. So 90% of 60 is 54. So we've maxed this out at 54% by choosing the Valino 08R. And we've got a chassis that's set up to be a 92% of all grip available is at 92%. Whereas up here, we've got the 200 tread wear. We can do a lot of laps, but it's not a lot of grip. This chassis is hitting 70%. You can pause and look at these. I did a whole video on this spreadsheet last week. Back to the tires. So scenario 2, we're going with Valino or a Vitour in that scenario. So you can see the Accelera and Kenda were better for the other one. Valino, Vitour, better for this one. And then let's go with a fun event. Let's not go competition. Let's go with Grid Life, Hyperfest, these types of events where there's really no competition. You just want to get as much time driving as possible. There's 2 tires I'm going to suggest here, and there's 2 reasons for it. So the first one is obviously the Accelera. There is a place for this tire, and a Kenda is very similar. If I say Accelera, you can pretty much assume that Kenda could get thrown in there as well. So Accelera is what I'm choosing because I know the guys at Tire Streets. I can get the tires. This is where I'm going. This tire is great for events like that. You're going to get way more laps and way more seat time. You're going to have people riding with you and they're going to have a blast, and they're not going to know. They're not going to know the difference of what you could be doing, what G's you could be pulling, how fast you could be going, or how much smoke it makes. Nobody cares. So they're in the car and they're having a blast. The other one I would recommend is if you're planning to tandem with a lot of higher end drivers, like when we went to Hyperfest, for example, we were in the pro class, so we were tandeming with the pros from FD and from other places. You might want to consider like the Zeknova Super Sport RS because this tire's grip isn't crazy. It's not like the Vitour or Valino, and its duration is pretty good. It was like an 8.5 duration, and this tire is quite a bit grippier than an Accelera or a Kenda. This tire is pretty good. So if you really wanted to door some people and maybe they're running the FD tires or something, this one will give you more duration and pretty close grip. I was able to be very competitive on this tire, and I was also able to do 3 or 4 practice laps when a lot of guys were only doing 2. The Accelera is probably the ultimate party tire, and it's also one of the best tires if everybody's running them. If everyone's running this tire, like the LZ World Tour, for example, I couldn't think of a better one because everyone's going to get laps and everyone's going to be dooring each other and everybody is going to be doing what each other is doing, and it's all down to the driver. This is not an Accelera sponsored ad, by the way. This is just simply facts, stating facts from my own experience. You're probably realizing that I didn't say what the ultimate best tire is full circle. That is kind of what the overall rating is for on the end of this chart. If we just look at grip, for example, we just look at this column. Yes, Valino and Vitour are your top tier, and then the GT, then Zeknova, and so on and so forth. But if I look at duration, Accelera is at a 9.5. So Valino's 9.5 in grip, Accelera is 9.5 in duration. Can't really compete with that. Consistency just means that the tire is repeatable. Now, a lot of them have pretty decent ratings, 9, 9, 9, 9. But some of them, you're going to want to stay away from these tires. They're not consistent. You're going to have issues. You might lose the entire tread on that one specifically. And then smoke, you know, a lot of judges and a lot of tandem battles are won and lost by simply getting lost in the smoke, and it just puts on a good show. And it can, depending on the competition you're in and if the judges are considering commitment and everything, smoke can be a direct result of the commitment and stuff. And whenever you're on an Accelera, you know, it may not be that you aren't committed, it's that the tire doesn't really make a lot of smoke. The one column I should have added, but I don't really know, because it really depends on you as a driver and what you're able to get, is price. Some drivers are able to get a GT cheaper than an Accelera. Some are able to get an Accelera the cheapest of all. I would say if you have no sponsors and you have nobody and you don't know anyone, Accelera is going to be your best bet for price. And then if you do have sponsors, that changes everything. Like I might get the Vitour for less than all of these tires and so on. So that's why I didn't choose to include the price. This is my breakdown of tires and the ones that I've run. Feel free to comment your own opinion and what you've run. And I know there's literally hundreds of different treadwears and sizes of tires and pressures you can run, etc., etc. So don't cut me up too bad, but feel free to start a conversation in the comments. No problems with that. That's it for today's tip video. Thank you guys for watching, and it's great when you guys comment what you want to see on the next one, because it makes my job easier. We can just sit down, make a spreadsheet, and talk about it. So see you guys in the next one. Later.